Glorious devotees, thank you for viewing this presentation on Sri Visvanatha Cakravarti Ṭhakura's Sri Madhurya Kadambini, the monsoon clouds of sweetness. We now enter into the second shower of nectar, and we will first review the various stages of Bhakti as revealed in various pramans, beginning with Srimad Bhagavatam. Before we do that, let us read from Visvanatha's Sri Madhurya Kadambini, where he gives us the following. We have not taken up the discussion of the differences between the dualistic and monistic philosophies, Dvaita, Advaita Vad, in this Madhurya Kadambini. So we see that he's not going to deal with that in this presentation, which is specifically directed toward practitioners of sadhana bhakti, striving for bhava ending in prema. We also notice in Sri Jiva Goswami's presentation of his Sandarbhas that he mentions in the very beginning, this presentation is specifically for those who are striving for unalloyed devotion to the Supreme Lord. That being the case, he would not be discussing in his Sandarbhas the philosophy of Advaita Vad, the impersonalistic viewpoint, which can be seen as unfavorable to the development of loving devotion. In the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the sages of Naimisharanya inquired from Suta Goswami what is the very best course of action for suffering humanity. And he begins his response to that inquiry made on their behalf by Sanika with the following verse. Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhaktir adoksaje ahaitaki apratiyata yayatma suprasidati. The supreme dharma for all human beings, sadhana bhakti, is that by which prema bhakti to the Lord arises, which is not caused by anything other than itself, cannot be obstructed, and which satisfies the mind completely. He then progresses in a series of verses to outline various stages of progressive practice of unalloyed devotion in the second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We will highlight some of those significant verses and show those stages as revealed in the verses given by Sri Suta Goswami. Sashusho Shraddhanasya Vasudeva Katharuchi Swan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nisevana. O Brahmanas, attraction for topics concerning Krishna will arise by service to the great devotees, followed by faith, by surrender to the feet of the pure Guru, and by the desire to hear. Suta Goswami proceeds, Shrinvatam Swa Katha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Rajantastyo Yadbadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam. Krishna, who purifies by the process of hearing and chanting, who is the benefactor of the devotees, who hear about him, enters the hearts of the devotees and destroys their sins. Nasta priyeshu aviyeshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatutama sloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. As the impediments to bhakti become generally destroyed, by constant service to the devotees and Bhagavatam, the stage of Nistika Bhakti to Bhagavan, who is praised by the greatest sages, becomes established. Tada rajas tamo bhava kama loba dayaschaye cheta etar anavadam Stitam sattve prasidati. The mind becomes unaffected by lust, greed, anger, hatred, and illusion, which arise from rajas and tamas. Then the mind becomes fixed in the form of the Lord at the stage of asakti and becomes satisfied. Evam prasana manaso bhagavad bhakti yogata bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. Then the mind becomes joyful and satisfied by attaining rati. Finally, prem develops, accompanied by the appearance of complete detachment. The devotee then experiences the Lord's form, qualities, pastimes, powers, and sweetness. Vidyate hridaya grantis, chijante sarva samsaya, sayanti chasyakarmani, trista evatmani sware. Ignorance is cut and all doubts are destroyed. On seeing the Lord in the mind and with the eyes, all karmas are destroyed. Next, we will review a verse composed by Srila Visvanatha Cakravarti Ṭhakura. The 14 steps are as follows: mercy of devotees, service to devotees, faith, surrender to Guru, desire for worship or hearing, bhakti, clearance of anarthas, nista, ruchi, asakti, rati, prem, seeing the Lord and experiencing the Lord's sweetness. So he's specifically himself from the opening discourse of the Bhagavatam and what Sutta revealed in his verses that we just reviewed, extracted these 14 stages of devotional practice. We also find that these stages of devotional practice, again, are brought up in the first canto, wherein Narada relates to Vedavyas his experience of sadhana bhakti leading to prem that resulted from his association of the sages who he had the good fortune of serving. Though the sages saw everything equally, they showed mercy to me, by which I, though a boy, developed sense control, gave up child's play and all agitation, became obedient, served attentively, and spoke little. In his commentary to these verses as they're presented, Vishwanath points out the various stages that are being revealed by Narada in his discourse, showing his progression into his personal devotional development. This verse, he relates, the first 4 stages of bhakti are understood here: mercy of the devotees, service to devotees, faith, and taking shelter of Guru. Narada continued, "One time only I happened to eat their food remnants with their permission. All obstacles to bhakti disappeared by that. Having developed an inclination for bhakti, being pure in mind, taste for devotional processes inevitably developed in my mind." Here Vishwanath writes in his commentary, by this verse, 5 stages of bhakti should be understood: desire for worship, bhakti, anartha-nivriti, nista, and ruchi. Narada's dialogue continues. By the mercy of the sages who were chanting about the attractive pastimes of Krishna daily, I heard about Krishna in that place with asakti. Hearing constantly, I then developed reti for Krishna. Viswanatha writes in his commentary, Shraddha here indicates the 10th stage, asakti. At every moment, or at hearing every word, I developed reti, bhava for Krishna. Those qualities are pleasing to hear. The Bhagavatam continues, in this way, for the 2 seasons of monsoon and autumn, I constantly heard the pure glories of the Lord chanted by the generous sages. I then developed prema, which destroys rajas and tamas in the jivas. Vishwanath writes here, prema, which destroys rajas and tamas. In all jivas, Atma then appeared. This is the 12th stage of bhakti. Vishwanath, interestingly enough, in his commentary, elaborates to the point that actually Narada was already free of all rajas and tamas at the earlier stages of sadhana, which proceeds up through the stage of asakti. Generally, when we look to the stages of progressive devotional practice, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas rely on a verse provided by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Adau Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sango Tha Bhajana Kriya Tato Nartha Niriti Shyat Tato Nista Ruchistata Atha Saktis Tato Bhavas Tata Prema Byadanshati Sadakanam Mayam Premna Pradur Bhave Bhavet Krama. So in these 2 verses, Srila Rupa Goswami gives 9 items or stages of progressive devotional practice. The first being Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, followed by Bhajana Kriya, or Nartha Nivritti, Nista, Ruchi, Asakti, Bhava, Prema. The verse in English reads as follows. First, one attains Shraddha, or firm faith, in the Shastras and teachings of sadhus. Then one gradually passes through the stages of Sadhu Sangha, association of pure devotees, Bhajana Kriya, practice of bhakti, and Nartha Nivritti, cessation of unwanted elements, unfavorable to the practice of bhakti, Nista, steadiness, Ruchi, taste, Asakti, attachment to the Lord, Bhava, permanent attachment to the Lord, and finally Prema, divine love. In this way, Prema gradually manifests in the devotee's heart. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has himself brought out stages of progressive devotional practice in his commentaries on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sri Shiksastakam, and he's done so as we will show in the following review. The first verse of Shiksastakam, of course, speaks very generally about the entire process of devotional service. The first verse itself is like a condensed verse that is then unpacked by Sri Chaitanya in his subsequent verses of the Shiksastakam. It goes, Glory to Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss It enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. In the second verse, we can find general reference to the beginning stages of sadhana bhakti, shraddha, sadhu sangha, bhajana kriya, and anartha nivritti. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower in the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. This verse speaks to the stage of nistha, wherein one becomes steady. One becomes so steady that he can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Or in other words, his whole life becomes dedicated to the practice of unalloyed devotion. This is the stage of nistha. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. Here we can see reference to ruchi, wherein all taste for material enjoyment is gradually falling away, and that even the desire for liberation is receding, and one wants only to serve the Supreme continually, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from the ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. Here we can see inference to the stage of asakti, wherein the spiritual practitioner, he's starting to recognize the nature of the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? This verse speaks to the level of bhava, wherein one becomes overwhelmed by spiritual emotion, so much so he has no control of sattvika bhavs, which he experiences in his sadhika deha, his physical body. O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. This speaks to the stage of prema, vipralamba, a complete longing to have the association of the Lord. Also, deep lobha, a spiritual greed to engage in personal service, even though one is at this stage separated from the Lord. And the final verse, I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. This speaks, of course, to the highest stage of prema bhakti. I want to thank you so much for taking your valuable time to view this presentation on Sri Visvanatha Cakravarti Ṭhakura's Madhurya Kadambini. We have now begun the second shower of nectar, and we will proceed progressively through these various stages as reviewed in this opening presentation. Hare Krishna.